It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The global trade war heats up. The US puts 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports. Canada retaliates again, and Trump takes aim at the EU and Ireland.
The EU was set up in order to take advantage of the United States.
Including Ireland? Is Ireland taking advantage of the US?
Of course they are.
Tonight, we'll analyse the UK response and why the government says it is considering all options. Also ahead, Putin heads to the front line under pressure to agree to a 30-day ceasefire deal, but regaining ground in the war. Captured on camera the moment a cargo ship crashes into a US tanker in the North Sea. As it emerges, the vessel, so long, had failed safety checks.
Based on what we know, how big a factor do you think human error is in this crash?
At the moment, it looks like 100%.
A Sky News special investigation into a children's home run by a cult, allegations of slave labour, abuse and sexual assault. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. President Trump's trade war is escalating to more countries tonight with 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports. In the Oval Office a little earlier, Donald Trump said again that the European Union has been taking advantage of the US. He was meeting the Irish Taoiseach Micheál Martin. In response, Canada has announced additional retaliatory tariffs on the United States, as has the EU. In a moment, we'll look at how it's impacting the UK and how Sir Keir Starmer is responding. But first, Sky's Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy, travelling with the Irish Prime Minister, reports from Washington.
Most years, when the visiting media pile into the Oval Office for the St. Patrick's meeting, they expect a cosy chat. But this year, this White House is so different. Micheál Martin was braced for a list of Donald Trump's grievances against the Irish trade surplus, against the EU, and that means tariffs.
Will you put more tariffs on the EU? Will you respond to their retaliation?
Oh, of course I'm going to respond.
You will retaliate
The problem
with more
is
tariffs.
our country didn't respond. Look, the EU was set up in order to take advantage of the United States.
Including Ireland? Is Ireland taking advantage of the US?
Of course they are. I can't, I have great respect for Ireland and what they did, and they should have done just what they did. But the United States shouldn't have let it happen. We had stupid leaders.
His guest was keen to point out, though, that money flowed both ways across the Atlantic.
President, if I could 1 second, just make the point. It's a two-way street too, and we are investing a lot more in America now. I understand where you're coming from fully, but I think it's a relationship that we can develop and that will endure into the future.
There was almost a sneaking admiration for the way Ireland has exploited US multinationals. Again and again, it was the European Union that bore the brunt of the president's ire.
I'm not happy with the European Union, I want to tell you. And,
Will you put tariffs
and
on
we're going to
cars?
win that. We're going to win that financial battle. It's a
Tariffs
financial
on
battle.
European cars, Mr. President? Tariffs on European cars? Is that something you're going to consider?
Oh, absolutely. I will do that.
Mr. President,
Think of it. They have millions of cars coming in, millions and millions of cars. One of probably the largest. Japan's very big too, but and they don't accept our cars. We make great cars. They don't have our cars, but we have their cars.
Trade wars are big, but they're felt by small firms. It's a long way from DC to rural County Meath, but here a cream liqueur firm that exports to 6 US states awaits new tariffs anxiously.
Look, we'll just have to persevere. We have no choice. We've put a lot of investment and effort into the US market, so we're going to keep going. It's like everything else, just the not knowing. So it's very hard to make plans with my distributors.
Back in Washington, the meeting wrapped without firm details about any new penalties for Europe.
In truth, Micheál Martin will be pretty relieved at how that went. Donald Trump may have said Ireland is taking advantage of the United States, but it seems clear he regards the European Union as the true culprit, not Ireland specifically.
A St. Patrick's meeting that in any other year would be considered incredibly confrontational. Now the Irish feel lucky, Europe perhaps less so. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Washington.
Well, the EU and the UK have been forced to respond to the tariffs imposed by Trump, but that response has been very different. Here, the government said it was disappointed, but it was focusing on a trade deal with the United States. Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has been looking at what the tariffs mean for the UK.
Making America great again by pushing up prices of foreign goods and that way getting punters to buy American instead. And Donald Trump does this with tariffs, otherwise known as import taxes. From 4 a.m. today, he slapped a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium imports from anywhere, including Britain. President Trump, he's so unusual because he's more open than any US president that I can remember that tariffs are about politics as well as economics. It's his negotiating tactic of choice. His most beautiful world. And they get lowered if you do deals with him, and they get raised if you anger him, like Canada did. And remember that as we watch the EU trying to impress Trump over Ukraine days after taking retaliatory action against the US over these trade sanctions. But it does mean pain all round. Now, take the 250 million tonnes of steel that last year went from Britain to the US. Tariffs are levied on the £400 million of UK steel as it goes through US customs. Now, the 25% charge flows straight into the US Treasury coffers, for sure, but prices also go up. American firms can buy less, and in some cases, there isn't a US alternative, so they hurt. But what does Britain do next? Well, not a lot. This morning, the business secretary issued a stern message, and this guy, Jonathan Reynolds, will head to the US next week for more talks. But what could we be doing? Well, this is how the EU reacted. 26 billion euros of tit-for-tat sanctions on all of these things and more. The list of goods targeted is 99 pages long. If we were still in the EU, we'd have to do all of this too, but we're not, and instead are hugging America close. Even if today, at Prime Minister's Questions, the Prime Minister wanted to look a little bit more open-minded.
We will take a pragmatic approach. We are, as he knows, negotiating an economic deal which covers and will include tariffs if we succeed, but we will keep all options on the table.
Two different approaches, the EU and the UK. So who's right? Well, let's be honest, this isn't about us. Look at this graph. We are, all the way over here, the 15th biggest exporter of steel to the US. Could the Prime Minister even fight this by retaliating? Now, the UK has gone down this path for a reason. Keir Starmer wants to remain a bridge between the US and Europe. He's decided to hug the White House close. They've punished us, but we're not hitting back, hoping this government remains trusted enough to do business with Team Trump. A big difference with Europe. But will Keir Starmer reap the rewards?
Sam Coates there. Well, let's go live then to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, who is in British Columbia tonight. And Martha, this is now a global trade war coming straight from the White House, and Canada, where you are, once again retaliating.
It certainly is, Anna, a whole suite of tariffs on steel and aluminium today from Donald Trump, and retaliatory moves too. This is now a fully fledged global trade war. This is Donald Trump's attempt, in effect, to reorder the world economy. He made the pitch about tariffs to the American people, and they voted for it. But it does come with risks too. Economists have long warned that tariffs will eventually dent the American economy, that they will result in raised prices for American consumers. So this is a big gamble that Donald Trump is taking. It may well not pay off. Meanwhile, Canada, where I am, British Columbia, is on the front line of trying to cope with these tariffs, working out how to deal with Donald Trump. Canadians not known, obviously, for being particularly outspoken or angry, but there is a genuine, very real fury among people here. I've been speaking to some of them to ask what they make of it all.
So we'll do a Canadiano.
A coffee shop on Vancouver Island and a quiet act of defiance.
Should have a Canadiano.
You want a Canadiano today? Sure, let's do it.
But beneath the bravado, a seething sense of betrayal.
You know, this bullying, you know, we're
a tenth of the size of that country, 300 million or 400 million people in the States and about 40 million in Canada. But we've picked no fight. But it just keeps coming to us.
On the top shelf, Alan hides the labels of American-made bottles.
Tennessee, Wayne Gretzky cream, and it's just about empty anyway.
Wayne Gretzky cream liqueur, once a Canadian ice hockey hero, now considered a traitor for his support of Trump.
He's proven that he doesn't even respect our country anymore.
In just the past few days, Canadians have been subject to an on-off, tit-for-tat whirlwind of economic punishments.
11 even.
One day, a threat of 50% tariffs on Canadian aluminium and steel, then revised back down to 25%. And now, the Canadian retaliation.
Et 1 minute demain. Starting at 12:01 a.m., March 13th, reciprocal tariffs of 25% on $29.8 billion worth of imports coming from the United States.
And the threats don't end at tariffs. Trump wants to make Canada the 51st state. It's not being taken lightly by the leader of this province.
I've been speaking to people, British Columbians, today, yesterday. They're genuinely fearful of annexation. Do you think that's a possibility, and are you scared?
So I find it deeply unsettling. The advice that we get continually about the president is to take him seriously, but not literally. I would love to have that kind of luxury. And the danger, I think, is not taking him literally and seriously.
Thanks for saying the BC ferries. On the ferry which links Vancouver Island with the mainland, there's real tariff fatigue. What do you think the end game of all this is?
Just to cause chaos, that's what I think. So yeah, not too thrilled about it, but it's kind of galvanized Canadians together, so that's the silver lining.
I was planning a trip to Las Vegas. We've cancelled that. Now we're going to Salt Spring Island. When I go to the grocery store, I look for the Canadian, the little maple leaf that a lot of grocery stores have put on the shelves to, try and purchase Canadian items or Mexican items, anything other than the United States.
But the question is, what power does Canada really have in the face of its much bigger, far wealthier neighbour? Martha Kellner, Sky News, British Columbia.
Well, in that exchange in the White House today, Donald Trump also said it is now up to Russia to agree to a ceasefire deal in Ukraine. A US delegation is on the way to Russia now to continue the talks. President Zelensky agreed to the 30-day pause in fighting, saying today that it could be used as a draft plan for longer-term peace. Well, fighting continues along the front line, and Ukraine was targeted again overnight by hundreds of drones and 3 ballistic missiles, including in Sumy, Odessa and Zelensky's hometown of Kryvyi Rih. Well, last summer, Ukraine shocked Russia by advancing 30 kilometres into their southern Kursk region. This map shows in yellow the territory Ukraine still held at the start of this month, which Kyiv had suggested could be swapped for Russian-occupied land inside Ukraine. Well, since then, though, Russia has made significant inroads, pushing Ukraine back, shown here in orange. Today, President Putin visited troops in Kursk for the first time. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports.
After 7 months in Ukrainian hands, the town of Sudzha is apparently Russian once more. Moscow's forces here are on the march. Kyiv's incursion appears almost over. For Vladimir Putin, a proud moment. On a visit to Kursk region, the commander-in-chief was the commander in camouflage, and there was no talk of a ceasefire. Quite the opposite. He wants to press home Russia's advantage.
Our task in the near future, in the shortest time possible, is to finally defeat the enemy entrenched in the Kursk region and to completely liberate the territory.
But after talks with Ukraine and Saudi Arabia, the US wants Moscow to agree to an immediate truce for 30 days. It could include a prisoner swap and the return of Ukrainian children from Russia. Kyiv hopes it'll lead to even more.
A 30-day period to fully prepare a step-by-step plan for ending the war, including security guarantees for Ukraine. If all of this is done, then after the plan is prepared and its gradual implementation begins, this will lead to the end of the war.
But agreeing to a deal that others have come up with, is not how the Kremlin does business.
Vladimir Putin likes to be the one in charge. And for the past few weeks, it looked like he was, appearing to have Donald Trump's ear. But now, all of a sudden, he's on the receiving end of the American president's demands. And his agreement on this ceasefire deal might depend on what else is being tied to it.
For example, a seat at the table with the US. Their recent talks in Riyadh have opened the door to a reset of relations. But could Washington take that away if Moscow doesn't agree to its truce?
If their response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear.
Back home, Vladimir Putin's intentions are clear: to sell the war as a victory. But a ceasefire may not go down that well.
We don't need this. That's all I can say. This is fascists trying to replenish their forces, take a break and continue. Russia doesn't need this.
I think there should be a cessation, but a cessation of the war overall, not just some fighting. That's why there should be negotiations, to come to an agreement.
The Kremlin said it would wait for more details before making a decision. It seems they're no longer calling the shots. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Sky News has obtained images of the moment two large ships crashed into each other in the North Sea. One person is still missing and presumed dead after a cargo ship hit a tanker carrying jet fuel for the US military, which had been anchored. It's emerged the captain of the Solong, a Russian national, has been arrested, and the vessel had recently failed steering-related safety checks. Sky's national correspondent Tom Parmenter has this report from Grimsby.
This was the moment of impact. Two huge vessels smashing together in the North Sea. A passing ship captured these images that also show how foggy it was on Monday morning.
So from here you can see a 360 view. At this point, can you avoid that?
At this point, we could.
This is a simulated view of what they would have seen from the cargo ship Solong.
If we take evasive action, we'll avoid collision. It just carried on. There didn't appear to be any collision avoidance at all. We can only assume nobody was watching. Nobody was at the controls. Nobody was aware of the fact that there was a ship right ahead of us. Otherwise, something would have happened.
Based on what we know, how big a factor do you think human error is in this crash?
At the moment, it looks like 100%.
Marine data shows the cargo ship was well used to navigating this busy shipping zone. The Solong had travelled this same route repeatedly over the past 5 months. On Monday, it was the 20th trip on this route that it had made since November. It then collided with the anchored Stena Immaculate. The speed was consistent with the other previous journeys, travelling between 11 and 17 knots.
Being familiar with a route doesn't give you any excuse not to be doing your job properly, not looking out the window, not avoiding collisions.
Is there any way this could have been sabotage or a deliberate act?
It wouldn't appear so. You can never rule it out, but I think it's unlikely.
What happened on the bridge of the Solong is now under criminal investigation. The man in charge of the vessel was Russian. The German owners of the ship say that all of their onboard crew will cooperate with Humberside police.
The Russian skipper is being questioned on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter after one of his crew was lost at sea. A tugboat is now holding the cargo ship in place, and neither vessel appears to be polluting the environment any further. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
To Westminster now, and the Prime Minister is under pressure from his own MPs tonight over expected reforms to the welfare system. MPs have been called to Downing Street to attend welfare roundtables. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Downing Street for us. So what do they fear is on the way then, John, and how big a problem is this for Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, Anna, all day long today, MPs, Labour MPs, most of them, it has to be said, the new intake, elected for the first time last year, been walking up Downing Street. There have been 4 meetings today, 45-minute meetings with policy officials from Number 10. They are trying to contain what looks like an inevitable rebellion on welfare cuts. MPs who came here said they were served luxury biscuits by Number 10. Well, that didn't sweeten their anger against the possibility of cuts. And what is really concerning Labour backbenchers is the threat of cuts to disability benefits. For example, the personal independence payments known as PIPs. Now, there are 4 more meetings tomorrow, starting at 8:30 in the morning, but there is no sign whatsoever of MPs being won over. At Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer was challenged by some Labour backbenchers and by Sir Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader. Sir Keir said, "I come from a family that dealt with a disability through my mother and brother over many years, so I understand the concerns." Well, he failed to give Sir Ed Davey the assurance he was looking for on disability benefits. He was asked by a Labour left-winger, that's Colin Bergen, who served in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet and lost the whip when he rebelled over the two-child benefit cap, why not bring in a wealth tax? Well, the Prime Minister said, instead of these cuts to disability, people are frightened, Mr Bergen said. Well, Sir Keir said that they'd brought in, for example, the energy profits levy, taxing non-DOMs, air passenger duty on private debts. But there is a real mutiny growing here on the Labour backbenches. One Labour MP said to me a short time ago, we should be putting a wealth tax on millionaires like Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He's the controversial boss of Ineos and Manchester United.
John, live in Downing Street, thank you. The former Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she will not seek re-election to Holyrood next year and will stand down as a member of the Scottish Parliament. The former party leader has been an MSP since 1999 and said representing Glasgow Southside had been an honour beyond words.
I think I've known for quite some time now, actually, in my heart, that this is the right time for me to close the book on this chapter of my life and look forward to new opportunities in the future. So I feel sad, but at the same time I feel really happy, and those emotions are probably in equal measure.
Hostages in Pakistan have been killed by separatist militants after they hijacked a train carrying hundreds of passengers. The group, the Baloch Liberation Army, claimed responsibility for the attack and said they had killed 50 people on the train, which was carrying more than 400 passengers. The BLA is the largest of several ethnic armed groups battling the government in Baluchistan, which borders Afghanistan and Iran. A Pakistani government spokesman has described the attack as an act of terrorism. The former Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has arrived in the Netherlands ahead of his trial in The Hague. He's facing charges of crimes against humanity for overseeing death squads in his war on drugs. The 79-year-old arrived in the Netherlands earlier today after being flown from Manila and could face trial within days. A Sky News investigation has uncovered more than 40 alleged victims of abuse at a children's home in Norfolk. The small school at Red House was closed in 1998, but victims have described the Danish operators of the home as a cult and claim they experienced physical and sexual abuse. A warning: Alice Porter's report contains references to sexual assault and to suicide.
Behind these bars was once a children's home and school. Hundreds of teenagers in care were sent to the small school at Red House between 1984 and 1998. 43 people now say they were abused. Hayley experienced violent restraining from staff.
I'd have someone sat on my back, someone on another arm. To the fact at some times I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. It was quite scary.
And you were just a teenager at the time?
Sorry.
She was also repeatedly raped.
I was sexually assaulted. When I went and told the teacher, they told me I was lying.
The Red House in Norfolk was isolated. The children barely had any lessons. In 1990, the Social Services Inspectorate warned local authorities against sending children to the Red House. listing allegations by pupils, such as sexual impropriety by a teacher, physical abuse by teachers, and a rape on the school premises by 3 male pupils. The home was run by Tvin, a controversial Danish group founded in the 1960s. They opened a number of unconventional schools in Denmark and 2 in England. Steen Thompson was once a member of Tvin's inner circle, known as the Teachers Group, but left because of the way it ruled his life.
If I had a relationship to one of the women within the Teachers Group, it would also be controlled.
If you wanted to date, form a relationship with somebody within the group, it had to be approved.
Yeah. Definitely if you wanted to marry, it would be difficult, or wanted to have children. It can be seen as a cult. I'm not a doubt about that.
Tvin became engulfed in financial scandal and its schools have mostly closed. But the group is still operating at the site of its iconic wind turbine, where it all began. I'm at Tvin and it's in a really remote area in West Denmark and it's still operating as a teacher training college. Now we know a former head teacher from the Red House works here and we're going to try and speak to him about the abuse allegations. But the man, who can't be named for legal reasons, wouldn't speak to us on camera. He's denied physically abusing any children in his care or knowing about any abuse by his staff. Those working at Tvin say they are not associated with the former Tvin Corporation. The Red House was shut down in 1998. Norfolk police have done 2 investigations into allegations of abuse, but no one has been charged. Victims are now in the process of suing the local authorities which sent them to the home and Norfolk County Council, who say that the allegations are deeply concerning and they have cooperated fully with investigations. Tvin continues to be a powerful force in many people's lives, but victims now want accountability for failures in a system which was meant to protect them. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, we end tonight in a Hertfordshire village with an unwanted visitor, a Harris hawk. The hawk has been dive-bombing residents in the village of Flamstead. Ouch. Villagers have no idea where the animal, which is native to South America, could have come from and say it only attacks men.
So far, it's only attacked men, but every instance, it attacked from behind. We had a chap called Glyn Perry. He's 91 years old. He's had 2 of his woolly hats pinched off of his head so far. He's now got a rain hat that he ties on. There's other people, somebody across the road got attacked while they were delivering leaflets asking people not to feed the hawk.
I think it's building a nest or something like that. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the Times chief political correspondent Aubrey Allegretti and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor Claire Ellicott. Welcome to both of you. And certainly among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front page of The Mirror, a trade war hammer blow, the headline there. Back in a moment.
we are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories tonight. Donald Trump has launched a fresh attack on the EU over tariffs during a meeting with the Irish Premier Michael Martin in the Oval Office, saying that he did not want to do anything to hurt Ireland, but the trade relationship between the two countries should be focused on fairness. Vladimir Putin has visited the front line in the war in Ukraine as Donald Trump urged the Russian president to agree to a 30-day ceasefire with Kyiv. And it's emerged that the cargo ship involved in a collision with a US tanker in the North Sea had failed safety checks. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the chief political correspondent of The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So, as ever, let's check out the front pages, starting with the Metro. It leads with Sir Keir Starmer insisting he won't be drawn into a dispute with Donald Trump over steel tariffs because he intends to pursue a bespoke trade deal for Britain with the US government. The Daily Mirror also leads on the trade war, with Trump's steel tariffs posing a threat to the steel industry in the UK. Sir Keir Starmer faces major backlash over his plan to cut billions from the welfare bill, in which the Prime Minister could face his biggest rebellion yet. That is according to The Guardian. The Eye also reports on the benefits turmoil in Number 10 as Labour MPs fight Rachel Reeves's plan to cut welfare. Record 5 million forced to pay higher rate tax. That's the headline on the front page of the Daily Mail. Back, peace, or I'll ruin you. The Times leads on Donald Trump's threat to Russia if Putin refuses to sign the ceasefire deal with Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister writes for The Telegraph, suggesting the way Britain is run is too bloated. Echoing similar recent moves in the US, two of the UK's leading financial watchdogs are dropping initiatives which promote diversity and inclusion. That's according to the Financial Times. The Sun has an interview with actress Michelle Keegan and TV personality Mark Wright about their new baby. So, Aubrey, Claire are here. Tariffs, the Metro to start with, deal or no steel. The question is what the UK does and whether Sir Keir Starmer just sits on his hands.
Absolutely. Well, I think this will come as a really significant blow because Keir Starmer made a huge amount of fanfare about going over to the US and trying to make the case about how the UK was a sort of average exporter-importer when it comes to trade with the US. So he hasn't succeeded in seeing off these tariffs. Instead, he's cast them as disappointing and said that they're sort of global, so the UK isn't being specifically targeted. But why is Donald Trump doing this? Well, first of all, he has plans to cut taxes dramatically, and therefore he needs to fund, if you like, all of the kind of public spending that he's going to keep on doing as US president. So he has to find a way of generating those sorts of revenues. So he's playing very much to a domestic base back home. Now, I spoke to senior civil servants who were around during the first Trump administration, and they said that actually UK steel is graded in a way that is very easy to carve out from these sorts of tariffs. And they made the case during the first administration. They didn't expect to get a hearings during the second one. So actually, it may not have come as a big surprise, but the UK has its bigger sort of eye on a prize, if you like. There are very tense negotiations going on over the Ukraine peace deal, and Keir Starmer doesn't want to do anything to rock the boat with Donald Trump. He wants to keep that relationship as tight as possible.
Yes, I heard 100,000 tonnes of steel. The figure you've got is 180,000 tonnes of steel. But the point is, it's high value. Steel shipped to America for nuclear submarines, for example, for the automotive industry, big in the States, clearly, and high-grade tin plate steel used in tin cans, which are consumed highly too. So do they want our steel? And is it still going to be worth 25% in, say, a year's time? And what are the prospects of this long-fought trade deal with America, which has been talked about since the first Trump term?
Well, I think that's the calculation Keir Starmer's making. Does he want to stay on side with Donald Trump, play this mediator role, sort out some of the problems with Ukraine, which is a far greater prize. And we don't export loads of steel to the US, and it's not going to be a huge... it's going to be problematic for the industry, but it's not going to be absolutely seismic in the way that it's really affecting Canada or the EU, who have both, they've both retaliated. But the UK's perspective is that, do we stay on side with Donald Trump or do we fight this? And I think Keir Starmer has made the calculation that it's not worth it to sit on his hands for now and to see how things go. And Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary and Trade Secretary, is off to the States next week to talk about a trade deal. They really want to hammer out an economic agreement. This could involve the UK being exempt from tariffs in the future. And, Keir Starmer's already put in the hard yards, speaking to Donald Trump to try to make sure the UK isn't included in tariffs. He said today he was disappointed at the fact that we are, but I think the UK... the government thinks that there is a prospect that they won't have to be subject to these.
Yeah, but in the meantime, if you take a look at the Daily Mirror, I mean, the UK steel industry has been limping for years. What is the hammer blow that this will deliver to it?
Absolutely, and the Labour Party has been seen as a sort of avid defender of the steel industry in the past. And although, when you look at the sort of amount of steel that we export to the US, we're a relatively small player in the overall game compared to other countries who will be much more impacted and affected by this. It's a really sort of totemic issue. You have parties like Reform suggesting that, the steelworks should be nationalised to try and secure the economic future of this industry. So it is really politically difficult for Keir Starmer, even though the number of jobs might be sort of relatively small in comparison to the number affected. He is going to have to show that he's not going to sort of bend down to Donald Trump, and he is prepared to hit back if he can. He kept open at Prime Minister's questions today the possibility of other retaliatory measures, using that phrase that, all options were on the table. But, I mean, realistically, who looking at this situation thinks that the UK has the kind of might to hit back in the same way that the EU are doing with, their 25% reciprocal tariffs, which are going to be £16 billion of goods exported to the US. The UK doesn't have that level of heft.
And in the meantime, it was the time for the Irish in the lion's den of the Oval Office. The Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, I thought did a very good job. We're now judging them on how they handle it. He silenced the journalists and not Trump, which I thought was quite a clever tactic, and fought back quite consistently, despite the fact that Ireland has given, its tax regime, which benefits international companies, including American firms who are there. So it's really in Donald Trump's sight, isn't it, Ireland?
It certainly is. And, I mean, you saw the interplay in that press conference. It was really interesting watching it. And the way in which, actually, he was very insistent on his criticism of the European Union without necessarily kind of getting drawn too much into Ireland, although that was a sort of byproduct in terms of what he was saying. So he's clearly got the EU in his sights, and the UK is now outside of it, but Ireland remains a very close partner, so I can't imagine it would have been the most comfortable viewing for Keir Starmer.
No. Who would want to go to the Oval Office for a visit? That's all I'm going to say, but we'll leave that there. In the meantime, let's go to UK domestic politics. A series of roundtables in Downing Street today, more as well on Thursday, we're being told, where Labour MPs are explained what welfare cuts are to come, why they're necessary, what's been happening?
Yes, so this is a really uncomfortable subject for a lot of Labour MPs, and they're being hauled into Number 10 to have meetings and to discuss what this might mean and to voice probably a lot of their misgivings, because I don't think you become a Labour MP to preside over benefits cuts, and it'll be really uncomfortable for a lot of them. The reality is, they have a huge majority. Will any of these Labour MPs rebel over the welfare reforms that we're expecting to see? I think that's unlikely. There'll be the usual suspects, people like Richard Bergen, who is a far-left MP. He stood up today in PMQs and sort of said, why aren't we making wealth taxes a thing? Why are we going after disabled people and people who are on benefits? But Keir Starmer's clearly made the calculation that this is something that needs to happen. The benefits bill is huge. The UK is struggling to pay it, and there's something needs to be done to get people back into work, and he's prepared to weather the storm of, the left of his party to do that.
We know the Tories worked on this. Mel Stride was tasked with getting back, in my memory, it was like 600,000 people, but we know many more are on sick leave, for example, or sick pay. Have we analysed why they're on, sick pay, sick benefits? what impact long COVID has had, what impact mental health has had for people, and whether it is possible, actually, to change this welfare bill, which is only going to go up, of course, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the welfare bill is set to balloon, particularly when you look at the number of people on disability benefits and how much that's changed since the pandemic. That is what is causing the most concern. And of course, once people are out of work, the fear is that the longer that they are out of work, the harder it then is to get them back in. So there is a sort of economic perspective which the government is taking, and that's why we heard today at Prime Minister's Questions an impassioned plea for him to consider the moral case as well. Now, I think, you know, thinking about what MPs are going to do on this matter, because The Guardian says that there is likely to be a vote on this. There is apparently a piece of legislation called the Social Security Administration Act of 1992, which basically dictates that personal independence payments have to rise by inflation each year. And so basically kind of changing that or curtailing it in any way would be something that MPs would be forced to vote on. Now, I'm sure Claire and I speak to no shortage of MPs who say, I'm going to speak out about this, I'm going to vote against that. They talk the talk, they don't always walk the walk. So it will be interesting to see how many of them do that. But I do think that underlying all of this, some MPs are getting quite frustrated. The Socialist Campaign Group, the sort of far-left group of Labour MPs, hasn't been particularly sort of powerful or potent. And more MPs who are generally disgruntled about the sort of direction of the government do want to put down a marker and say, you know, we're not being listened to. We don't feel as though this is the sort of ethos of the government that we want to be part of. So I wouldn't be surprised if actually there are more that decide to make, you know, a sort of a stink about this. Than
and if you genuinely cannot work, and it doesn't go up by inflation, how do you live is the point, isn't it, really? In the meantime, Daily Telegraph, you have to pinch yourself and remember this is a Labour government. I'll tackle flabby state, vows Sir Keir.
Yeah, so he's written for the Telegraph. He's saying that, you know, the state is too flabby and what? This is all part of this idea of civil service reform. So they want to cut the number of civil service jobs and make sure, you know, that regulators have a pro-growth agenda. It's all incredibly Tory, like you say. So it's quite... I think I saw a Tory earlier who basically remarked on the fact that this government is possibly more Tory than the last government, which is an incredible thing to say. But whether or not you can deliver any of these things is a huge question. It's sort of the... it's sort of, you know... I've been doing politics for a long time. We've been talking about civil service reform for a long time. It's very, very hard to do. How do you shake it up?
Yeah, it's the holy grail of every government, isn't it? I mean, we hear this all the time, isn't it? Cuts and trims, cuts and trims. People do say civil service got bigger during COVID. Has it been shrunk down already? Where would you trim? You know, does it feel Trumpian, Elon Muskian to trim too much? You know,
there is a sort of element of channeling Elon Musk, isn't there? And a lot of people sort of try to do it without sort of directly invoking his name. But DOGE, you know, the Department of Government Efficiency that he runs in the US, is something that actually lots of Labour people look to and say, you know, we want to sort of try and emulate this, although, you know, in the spirit, not necessarily in the reality of how it's kind of been borne out, because obviously it's been plagued with all sorts of troubles over there. But, you know, Labour MPs know that there are basically three ways to sort of try and deal with spending. There's tax rises, there's spending cuts, and there's welfare. Those are the three buckets we were told at Rachel Reeves's first budget that they were going to have to deal with. They've basically, you know, tried to talk as much as possible about not raising taxes. And so now they're going after this, well, if we're going to have to cut benefits as well and reduce the overall welfare bill, then they want to look as though they're being tough. And we're hearing this language from the Prime Minister tomorrow on a visit to Yorkshire. He's saying he will take on a cottage industry of checkers and blockers slowing down delivery for working people, which sounds, very much like a direct attack on the government and the people working for it.
They'll try this and then they'll change their fiscal rules, won't they? Probably, but there we are. Lots more still to come. In the next part of our programme, is Donald Trump changing his tune towards Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine? We'll discuss that next.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts. I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor. I've covered Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I'm Dan Whitehead, Sky News' West of England and Wales correspondent. Sky News, get the full story first, free, wherever you get your news.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Whoa!
Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Aubrey Allegretti and Claire Ellicott. Welcome back to both of you. Your paper, I should have done it before the break, but I forgot. So let's do it now. A record 5 million are forced to pay the higher rate of tax. Do explain.
Well, so this carries on from what we were discussing before, the tax rises that, Rachel Reeves doesn't want to discuss. What's happening here is you have threshold freezes, so the rate at which people start paying higher rate taxes. More people are being dragged into these brackets because they're frozen while wages increase with inflation. And my newspaper is reporting that there are more than 5 million have crossed the threshold of higher rate for the first time. An extra 680,000 people dragged into the 40% tax bracket, and compared to the year earlier. And the real problem with this is it's affecting middle-class people like teachers who, the higher rate was never really designed to hit. It's affecting, large swathes of the middle classes who would never normally have been forced to pay these taxes, and it means that people have less income as a result. And it's just one way to increase Treasury coffers without actually putting taxes up.
And ultimately, people don't pick up extra days, and therefore it damages productivity at the end of the day, doesn't it, actually? Let us go to the Times, then, shall we? And this is leading on the pressure now on Putin by Trump. You know, Ukraine's had pressure. So what's the latest then in terms of trying to end this war in Ukraine?
Absolutely. So we know that there was a breakthrough in talks between Ukrainian and US officials over the last few days who were meeting in Saudi to try and broker a sort of ceasefire deal that was acceptable to both sides and very much take the tension out of that acrimonious press conference. Well, you know, sort of, it wasn't really a press conference, but, you know, it felt like watching a spectacle in the Oval Office last week.
Well,
and so
we're
now
on these pictures right now, which is extraordinary. So this is the Kursk region, which is Russian territory, which had been controlled by Ukraine. They wanted it as a bargaining chip for their own territory, but now Russia's really pushed large proportion of the Ukrainian forces out of that area.
And this is what British officials were so worried about, was that by sort of talking down the potency of the threat posed by Ukraine, that would embolden Russia and they would feel that Ukraine was on the back foot. You saw that in the rhetoric from Donald Trump in the Oval Office when he was saying, you're not in a strong position, you don't have any cards. They worried that this would sort of lead exactly to the images that we're seeing now of Vladimir Putin, who has just been visiting troops on the Russian front line, very much trying to show a position of strength there. And so Donald Trump has pivoted his attention today. He was speaking to reporters in the Oval Office in that meeting with the Irish Taoiseach that we saw earlier, and he was saying that he could do things financially that would be very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. So effectively he's saying that there can be more financial sanctions that he could levy on Russia to try and force their hand. Now, we know that obviously sanctions have been in place for a number of years, but US officials are believed to be heading to Russia to discuss this ceasefire deal that's been brokered with Ukraine, including the special envoy. And US officials have discussed the ceasefire proposed deal with their Russian counterparts on the phone. But we're going to see a lot of this kind of imagery, projection of strength from Vladimir Putin. He won't want to sort of be seen to back down.
Yeah, and more Trump-related news in terms of Greenland and its elections.
Yes, so the centre-right party in Greenland has celebrated a surprise election victory. And this comes after Donald Trump was threatening to take over the island. And there was a big debate about where Greenland wanted to be, really, whether it needed to be close to Denmark, whether there would be a world in which it would be close to the US, or whether it wanted to kind of stay independent. But this is a clear message to Donald Trump that Greenland does actually want to stay as it is and is not for sale.
Yeah, and a story that is in, well, I've seen two papers, but it's certainly in yours, Aubrey. Married men, why do they get fat?
It's a good question. So we see these statistics here that say that...
They don't all get fat, by the way.
Well, but they are apparently 3 times more likely to be obese than single men. But there is no link between marriage and obesity rates in women. So they seem to be an outlier in this regard. And experts that the Times has spoken to suggest that this is because married women are under more pressure to keep fit and maintain their figures, as cultural differences mean they face greater discrimination if they become obese. But that's not something I'm necessarily qualified to talk about. But yes,
I think it is the eye that says the proof that married men really do let themselves go. So there we are. Obesity risk triples after wedding, but not for women. Changes associated with becoming a parent have also been linked to weight gain, as fathers get into the habit of finishing off their children's leftovers and may have less time to go to the gym.
Some of us are scouring for scraps. I mean, I had to eat a sandwich just before I came on.
Exactly. No, the sandwich is still under the desk. Let's be honest about it. I did threaten to out you. I've just done it. I do apologise. The sandwich is here. Both of you stayed there. Thank you both very much indeed. Aubrey, Claire, thank you. We're going to take a look at the weather now. Where is it?
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the rest of the week looks rather cold, with widespread overnight frosts and some potentially wintry showers. There'll be a mostly fine start tomorrow, although frosty for many, but eastern Britain will see showers running in off the North Sea. Many parts will stay dry through the morning, but showers will develop more widely, mainly over central and eastern England. Hail, sleet and hill snow are possible. The northwest of Ireland and Northern Ireland will see a little patchy rain moving in too. It will be cold again, but less windy than today. Ireland and Northern Ireland will see cloud and patchy rain clearing to the southeast later. Northern Scotland can expect a few showery outbreaks. Elsewhere, little change. England will see showers largely fading by evening.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. Donald Trump continues to escalate his trade war with the rest of the world, levying 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports and taking aim at the EU and Ireland.